Good morning. We're going to begin right away, and we know that votes are probably going to be called, and we may have to put this hearing into recess. So let's get as much as we can get done early on. So this committee will come to order. The subcommittee today is here to hear testimony on innovative approaches to abandoned mine land reclamation and the economic development opportunities that reclamation can provide, and also on H.R. 315, Mr. Lahood's Community Reclamation Partnership Act. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chair and the ranking minority member or their designee. I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. today. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent for Congressman Lahood and Congressman Thompson to sit on the dais and participate in this morning's hearing. Hearing no objection, so ordered. To begin, I want to emphasize the bipartisan nature of this hearing and thank my ranking member, Mr. Gosar, for working with us on this hearing and on several bills on this topic last Congress. I hope we can continue to work together to make cleaning up abandoned mines a priority in this Congress. The Abandoned Mine Land, or the AML program, was enacted because the American people agree on a basic principle that polluters should pay. The coal industry, not the American people, must pay for the legacy of pollution. For centuries, the coal industry extracted profits, ignored the pollution they left behind, which were mountains of waste rock, webs of unstable mine shafts, rivers turned orange with acid mine drainage. The industry just didn't have to answer for any of it. But the enactment of the AML program meant the coal industry would pay a small fee that would be used to clean up this mess. Over 40 years later, the cleanup is still far from done. There is still over $10 billion worth of abandoned coal mine sites waiting to be addressed, and the fees being paid by the coal industry to clean up these sites expires in 2 years. 2 years is not enough time to finish cleaning up centuries of pollution. Coal industry says it can no longer afford the AML fee, that it's unfair because the industry reclaims mines now, that the market has declined too much. But as we have seen, these objections don't stop the industry from paying enormous bonuses to executives. When the coal industry says it can't afford the reauthorization of the AML fee, that means the costs fall on the people that it left behind. They have to dealing with the polluted water that they can't drink, suffering from diseases that shorten the quality and length of their lives, and those who are living in towns that are, and those are left living in towns that are desperate for new economic opportunities. Let's be clear, coal is not coming back. Workers and communities are being hit hard by the decline of coal, need new jobs and a diversified economy, and they need them now. Abandoned mine reclamation projects can improve the environment and protect the public health while providing jobs and leading to economic development opportunities. Through the AML pilot program, we've already seen evidence that this strategy can work. I look forward to hearing some of those success stories today. The same idea is behind the Reclaim Act, the idea that we can accelerate the cleanup of AML sites while promoting long-term community and economic development. We moved the Reclaim Act through this committee last Congress on a bipartisan basis. And while it hasn't been reintroduced yet, I understand that it's coming soon and hopefully we'll have the same success in this Congress, the same success in this committee and then in this Congress. Another bill we moved in a bipartisan manner last Congress is the Community Reclamation Partnership Act, which allows third-party organizations to use their own funds to clean up watersheds while also protecting those good Samaritans from liability under the Clean Water Act. There's no question that the ideas in Reclaim and the CRPA, which is the Community Reclamation Partnership Act, these policies can jumpstart economies and speed watershed cleanup. But we're still going to never finish cleaning up all these abandoned mines if we don't reauthorize the AML fee. Mining companies must continue to pay their share to clean up the pollution left behind by their industry. Volunteer efforts such as those supported by the CRPA are very important. Don't let me say that they're not. They are. And they're helpful. But they are not nearly enough to address the remaining inventory of abandoned mines. It took about 5 years to negotiate the last reauthorization. So even though we have we're 2.5 years in advance of needing to reauthorize, it's not too early to begin that discussion. With that, I look forward to the testimony from our witnesses, and I now recognize Ranking Member Gosar for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, am encouraged to see the bipartisan effort today as we consider H.R. 315, the Community Reclamation Partnership Act. This bill would amend the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, or SMCRA, of 1977, enabling states to partner with non-governmental organizations to clean up abandoned coal mine sites across the country. Thousands of inactive coal mines abandoned before modern regulations with no living responsible party exist around the country. These abandoned mines pose environmental and health risks to local communities and stymie economic development. Costs to remediate these liabilities are estimated at about $10.5 billion. Currently, state reclamation activities are funded solely by fees levied on the coal industry. About $4 billion worth of abandoned mine land, or AML, has been remediated as a result, but much remains to be done. The cost of reclaiming these sites could continue to strain state resources in the coming decades, while site conditions will deteriorate further over time. Certain NGOs have recognized the need for reclamation in coal communities and are willing to contribute their resources and expertise to address the problem. Unfortunately, liability and regulatory concerns have discouraged their involvement in cleanup projects in the past. This legislation will empower NGO participation in state reclamation programs by minimizing underserved liability while drawing on proven state-specific practices established by state reclamation agencies. This legislation would recognize non-governmental entities who wish to conduct reclamation projects, including watershed groups, conservation organizations, and industry partners, as community reclaimers. It would allow the state to extend liability protection to these groups, much like they already do for their approved reclamation contractors under SMCRA. H.R. 315 also addresses complications with water pollution at AML sites. One of the most challenging aspects of mine reclamation is the treatment of acid mine drainage. Currently, states are required to fully comply with Clean Water Act when treating water at AML sites. While water quality can be greatly improved, many AML sites cannot achieve Clean Water Act standards, even with the best water treatment systems in place. As a result, states must choose between risking non-compliance under the Clean Water Act or forgoing acid mine drainage abatement projects altogether. Some states have established their own guidelines for water treatment at AML sites. These state-specific strategies have resulted in successful water treatment projects and a significant reduction in acid mine drainage in several states. However, these states risk lawsuits as there are no current statutory authorization for their water treatment programs. H.R. 315 would fix this, allowing for the states to craft their own acid mine drainage treatment strategies. These strategies must be laid out in the form of a memorandum of understanding between the relevant state and federal agencies, then approved by the EPA and the Department of Interior. Community reclaimers would then be able to execute acid mine drainage projects consistent with the approved MOUs in each state. The Community Reclamation Partnerships Act passed this community last Congress by unanimous consent and passed the House by a voice vote. I look forward to a similar result this time around. Hopefully the Senate will follow suit so that this bill can finally reach the President's desk. I thank the witnesses for being here today, and with that I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Now I'm going to introduce today's first witness, Congressman Darin Lahood, representative for Illinois' 18th Congressional District, and the original sponsor of H.R. 315, the Community Reclamation Partnership Act. Mr. Lahood, welcome to the committee. You are now given 5 minutes for testimony.
Well, thank you, Chairman Lowenthal and Ranking Member Gosar, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. And as a former member of the Natural Resources Committee, it's good to be back here, and appreciate the other members being here today. For this opportunity to present H.R. 315, again, the Community Reclamation Partnerships Act. And as you referenced in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, last year this legislation passed the U.S. House of Representatives with strong bipartisan support. And I look forward to working again with this committee, the House leadership, and interested stakeholders on this important issue in the 116th Congress. The Community Reclamation Partnerships Act will help address the complex legal and funding-related challenges for abandoned mines across the nation. The Community Reclamation Partnership Act amends the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977, SMCRA, to enable states to partner with non-governmental entities to reclaim abandoned mine sites and facilitate acid mine drainage cleanup across the country. Non-governmental entities like Trout Unlimited have recognized the need for reclamation in coal communities and are willing to contribute their resources and expertise to address the problem. You'll have the chance to hear more from Chris Wood, the President and CEO of Trout Unlimited, on the next panel. Unfortunately, liability and regulatory concerns have discouraged these groups from partnering with the states on reclamation projects. This legislation enables NGO participation in state reclamation programs by minimizing underserved liability and codifying proven practices established by the state reclamation agencies. This legislation also addresses a frequent problem that states experience in addressing water pollution at abandoned mine sites. States must choose between risking noncompliance under the Clean Water Act or forging acid mine drainage abatement projects altogether. Some states, like Pennsylvania, have successfully addressed this problem by establishing their own guidelines for the treatment of water pollution at abandoned mine sites. These state-specific strategies have resulted in successful water treatment projects and a significant reduction in acid mine drainage in several states. Currently, state reclamation activities have been funded solely by fees levied on the coal industry over the past 4 decades. These fees have resulted in the reclamation of approximately $4 billion of abandoned mine liabilities. However, according to the Department of the Interior, the estimated remediation cost exceeds $10 billion. The outstanding abandoned mine land liabilities in my home state of Illinois is $156 million. And in the 18th Congressional District, which I'm fortunate enough to represent, it's $17 million. The cost of reclaiming these sites will continue to strain state resources in the coming decades, and the conditions of these sites will only worsen over time. In short, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, this bill empowers state and local community leaders who want to assist in abandoned mine cleanup efforts so that future development can occur in these areas. No group should be punished for wanting to help out their local community in a responsible way. Thank you again for your time today, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lahood. Unfortunately, votes have been called, and we're going to need to recess and to come right back for our second panel. We appreciate everybody's patience. We will be right back. So this hearing is in recess, subject to the call of the Speaker.
Testing the sound.
This committee is now in order. I want to thank the panel for being patient and the members for showing up. And now that the second panel has taken their seats, let's go through on this panel. We have Mr. Eric Cavassa, Director of the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Next we have, next to him, no we don't, we have Mr. Hughes. We have, let me just see in my notes. We have Mr. Robert Hughes, Executive Director for the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. Then next to Mr. Hughes, we have Mr. Eric Dixon, Senior Coordinator of Policy and Community Engagement at the Appalachian Citizens Law Center. Then we have Mr. Dan Fisher, Treasurer of the City of Gillespie, Illinois. Gillespie. And then finally we have Mr. Chris Wood, President and CEO of Trout Unlimited. Let me remind the witnesses that they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, that their entire statement will appear in the hearing record. When you begin, the lights on the witness table will turn green. And after 4 minutes, the yellow light will come on. Your time will have expired when the red light comes on, and I will ask you to please complete your statement. I'll allow the entire panel to testify before questioning the witness. The chair now recognizes Mr. Cavassa to testify.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Eric Cavazza, and I serve as the Director of Pennsylvania's AML program. I am appearing today on behalf of the Interstate Mining Compact Commission and the National Association of Abandoned Mineland Programs. We appreciate the opportunity to share our perspectives on the status of AML work funded through Title IV of SMACRA. As the 116th Congress commences, the AML program approaches a crossroads. The AML fee on which the program relies is set to expire in 2021. Meanwhile, in an era of increasing economic hardship for coalfield citizens, the AML program's work has become more important than ever. This is evidenced by the widespread discussions in recent years surrounding innovative applications to AML work. These include enhancing partnerships for mine drainage impacted water treatment through the Community Reclamation Partnerships Act, and enhancing economic revitalization and community development through the AML pilot program and the Reclaim Act. Recent attention to the AML program, including bipartisan support for the CRPA and Reclaim Act, show clear recognition by all of the fundamental role AML work plays in the well-being of coalfield communities, and not just in terms of health and safety, but for their future economic and environmental benefit as well. All of the states and tribes involved in the AML program have an ongoing need for AML funding. This is especially true for addressing AML emergencies. The AML programs are usually the only entities equipped to address these suddenly occurring and oftentimes life-threatening emergencies, and the AML fee is the primary and often the only source of funding to resolve these significant health and safety issues. To highlight the importance of the AML program in different parts of the country, the state and tribal programs have come together, led by Wyoming and Pennsylvania, to develop a website, ourworksnotdone.org. The Our Works Not Done project, through a collection of video documentaries, news articles, and testimonials, helps tell the story from the perspective of the citizens, property owners, local officials, and contractors who experience or deal with AML problems firsthand. These include a woman whose home was stabilized by the AML program after facing a desperate situation when the mine beneath her home collapsed, an AML contractor who is making a living sealing abandoned mines after the mine he worked in closed, and a group of local fishermen fighting back tears as they behold their local stream, which had been orange and lifeless for as long as they could remember, now clean and full of trout. I encourage everyone to check out the website to see these stories for yourselves. It is important to note that all of the work highlighted there was made possible by grant funding derived from the AML fee. A review of the AML work completed over the life of the AML program, as documented in the Federal AML Inventory, shows that great progress has been made. Over 858,000 acres of abandoned mine hazards have been reclaimed so far. That area matches the entirety of Yosemite National Park, or nearly 20 times the size of Washington, D.C. But the AML inventory also reflects a sobering truth. The amount of time and funding provided to date does not approach the scale of the 2 centuries in the making coal AML problem. OSMRE projects that only 1/3 of what is needed to fully address the $10 billion inventory of unreclaimed AML sites will be distributed over the remaining life of the program. This means that without reauthorization of the AML fee, many thousands of AML sites will remain unreclaimed, and AML emergencies will continue to occur with no dedicated source of funding to address them. The continuation of the AML program's contributions, including those to economic revitalization efforts, cannot be sustained without the AML fee. As Congress considers the CRPA and the Reclaim Act, we should also be mindful of the need to ensure the stability of the base program itself. IMCC and the AML Association therefore recommend that in order for Congress to achieve its goals for coalfield regions in the long term, extension of the AML fee be considered an utmost priority. While the AML fee's expiration in 2021 is still 2 years away, deliberations of this scale take a significant amount of time to complete. In closing, we appreciate the attention paid by Chairman Lowenthal and the subcommittee today to the enduring importance and wide-ranging benefits of the AML program, and we stand ready to help inform Congress as consideration of reauthorization proceeds. The AML program can help establish the fundamental stability that coalfield communities need to thrive and to have a bright economic future. But to get there, a future for the AML program must be secured. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Cavazza. Now the chair recognizes Mr. Hughes to testify.
Thank you, Chairman Lowenthal. My name is Robert E. Hughes, the Executive Director for the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. I'm accompanied here today by my Program Manager, Michael Hewitt. On behalf of EPCAM, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to speak before the committee. It's a privilege to be a grassroots representative and community organizer from the anthracite coal region. EPCAM is a 23-year-old regional environmental nonprofit whose mission is to encourage the reclamation and redevelopment of land and remediation of polluted mine water affected by past mining practices. Pennsylvania has the highest number of AMD and AML impacted sites nationwide, with an estimated $5 billion worth of unfunded problems in the federal inventory. 2.7 million Pennsylvanians live within 1 mile of an abandoned mine site. The 4 largest anthracite coal deposits are in a 484 square mile of our region. Over 250 years of mining has resulted in the extraction of 18 billion tons of coal. The projected costs of reclamation, abatement, and remediation are substantial, and many of our smaller municipalities lack the capital financial resources, ability to leverage multiple sources of funding, and infrastructure investment opportunities. Simply put, we're looking for better opportunities, jobs, economic resilience, and reclamation funding to significantly improve our quality of life and the environment. We don't deserve to have to wait any longer for clean streams, green spaces, vibrant and diversified economies in our communities. Pennsylvania is effectively riddled with AMD and AML sites that need to be cleaned up with continued bipartisan support, since these landscapes and waterways show no concern for congressional or municipal boundaries. For example, in Congressman Cartwright's district, it's plagued by over 14,000 unreclaimed acres and 192 miles of AMD impacted streams. Some of the most notable features in his district include the Old Forge borehole and the Jetto mine tunnel. Each discharge could fill 100 Olympic-sized swimming pools per day. In Congressman Thompson's district, represented by Honorable Glenn Thompson, has over 91,000 unreclaimed acres and 2,700 miles of streams that are impacted. We would like to both thank Honorable Congressmen for their bipartisan leadership over the years, because we know they have witnessed firsthand these environmental scars. EPCAM has worked closely with an organization called the Earth Conservancy, a regional partner of ours in northeastern PA. They've reclaimed abandoned mine lands as recently by reclaiming them using AML funds, and then sold them to private companies that flip the properties to major warehouse distribution centers like Chewy.com, Adidas, and DHL to bring in thousands of jobs to our area. EPCAM believes that there's a definite need to coordinate with economic development authorities, alternative energy companies, and private investors to leverage state and federal AML funds to reduce overall project costs. In order to accelerate the reclamation of these sites, we need to be sitting at the table with these entities to share funding opportunities to make them more attractive and economically feasible to develop. EPCAM and a team of experts completed 3 mine pool studies for the potential usage of water stored in the underground mines in the anthracite region to determine availability of quality and quantity of mine water resources, including 3-dimensional mapping and modeling of these underground mines. We've conservatively estimated that there are over 544 billion gallons of untapped mine water in Pennsylvania. We're starting to look at them as resources and not as pollution sources. The mine pools can be viewed as both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that the potential availability of the billion gallons of water in the mine pools are the resources for present and future use. The degradation of 5,500 miles of streams of mine drainage are the curse. EPCAMERA would like to see the House Natural Resources Committee work with the Appropriations Committee to support an increase in the abandoned mine lands pilot program for fiscal year 19 and 20. We were awarded a $4 million pilot program project in Swearsville, PA, to reclaim 15 acres of the former Harry E. Colliery refuse pile, and we're leveraging an additional $8 million in private investment for that project. The pile is one of the largest remaining waste coal piles in the Wyoming Valley. Approximately half of the AML site will be converted into a recreational community athletic area for the community. EPCAMERA has partnered with the anthracite coal industry and cogeneration plants on this project, and we also support the remining of old abandoned mine sites by the industry as partners in reclamation. EPCAMERA would like to see the extension of the Abandoned Mine Land Trust Fund to 2036 because these projects need long-term planning. The fee restructuring to 1977 historic levels for both underground and surface mining. We'd like to increase the minimum program states funds to $5 million annually and have the Title IV grants under SMACRA exempt from sequestration. EPCAMERA is supportive of the premise of the formally introduced Reclaim Act as it was reported out of this committee in the last Congress. It's interconnected with the extension of the SMACRA reauthorization. They are integral to one another because they are eliminating the health and safety hazards and creating jobs and infrastructure at the same time. EPCAMERA, along with the Foundation for PA Watersheds and 57 other coalfield organizations throughout Appalachia and others from around the country, have signed on to a letter to the Committee on Appropriations and the FY20 Appropriations Bill to urge them to support critical investments in coalfield communities. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a look into some innovative approaches to reclamation of abandoned mine lands in ways that will take into consideration economic development and future job opportunities for our coal fields. If you like orange water and want a tour of the Centralia mine fire, then come visit us in the anthracite region. EPCAMERA looks forward to working with Congress to further our goals in some of the hardest hit areas of the country that ironically help to build our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. The committee now, or the chair now recognizes Mr. Dixon.
Good morning, Chairman Lowenthal, Ranking Member Gosar, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today on the Reclaim Act. My name is Eric Dixon, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of Policy and Community Engagement at Appalachian Citizens Law Center in Letcher County, Kentucky. We represent coal miners on issues of black lung and mine safety. We litigate cases related to the environmental cost of extractive industry, and we advocate on issues related to abandoned mines and a just transition in Appalachia. I live in Knott County, Kentucky, where there's an abandoned coal mine less than a mile from my front porch. Every day on my drive to work, I pass vacant homes and businesses, cracked and broken roads, closed schools and senior citizen centers. The economy has never been good or fair in Central Appalachia, but it has recently gotten much, much worse. Letcher County once had over 2,000 coal jobs. Now there are fewer than 100. People are hurting. Along my route, I also pass a spot where acid mine drainage pours out of the mountainside, turning Sandlit Creek bright orange. It starts at the local fire department and runs along the front yards of homes where children are often playing. There are thousands of abandoned mines in Kentucky and tens of thousands across the country. It will cost at least $10 billion to clean up all of the land and water damaged by pre-77 coal mines. You can't live safely near many of these sites, much less launch a business or get a local economy going. A few steps from our office sits the county courthouse, where in 2015, the county government passed a resolution urging Congress to introduce what would become the Reclaim Act. Through 2015 and 2016, 29 localities across 4 Appalachian states urged Congress to take action on this bill. In 2016, the Reclaim Act was introduced by Representative Hal Rogers, Matt Cartwright, and others. The Reclaim Act has 2 main goals. First, create thousands of jobs fixing damaged land and water in communities devastated by the decline of coal. And these are jobs that many people in the local workforce, including laid-off coal miners and others, have the heavy machinery skills to do well. And second, to spur many more jobs and other benefits through development on these sites once they're cleaned up. Now, based on the version of Reclaim passed by this committee last Congress, Reclaim would use $1 billion of the $2.3 billion AML fund collected from the coal industry for the purpose of mine reclamation that's currently sitting in Washington. Every AML dollar would be spent exclusively on coal mine cleanup, not on economic development projects themselves, though these projects will be designed with a future development use in mind. Last Congress, Reclaim had 40 bipartisan co-sponsors. Recently, communities doubled down on their support. Localities passed 27 more resolutions. In Kentucky, local officials and reclamation businesses are pressing Congress to pass this bill. Recent projects in Appalachia demonstrate the concrete potential of pairing mine cleanup with development. A renovated mine exhibit in Kentucky and adjacent new small businesses. An aquaponics facility powered by on-site solar in West Virginia. Boating and angling in a remediated river in Maryland. And a Virginia winery that's been operating for over a decade on a reclaimed surface mine. These projects won't create enough jobs to single-handedly revitalize the local community, but they are making a meaningful contribution to building a new, diverse economy and making our communities safer. Reclaim is only part of that much, much larger task. The black lung epidemic must be stopped. Coal companies need to pay their fair share for the damage wrought on miners' lives and on land across the country. Unfortunately, neither of these problems are going away anytime soon. Congress should extend the black lung tax rate that expired at the end of 2018 and reauthorize the AML program beyond its current 2021 sunset. On those same drives home from work, I tune into our mountain community radio station. I hear stories of lives shattered by mass layoffs, but also voices determined to build a future in a place they believe is worth fighting for. I urge Congress to listen to the community-led movement for a brighter future in our nation's coal communities and pass the Reclaim Act as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. The chair now recognizes Mr. Fisher for 5 minutes.
I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Dan Fisher, and I'm the treasurer of the city of Gillespie, Illinois, but I'm not here on behalf of the city itself, although I certainly love our city and I'm very proud of its accomplishments. I'm here to build upon what Mr. Dixon has testified today. We have seen in the central part of Illinois that reclamation of coal mines can lead to economic and community development. I live a little closer to an abandoned mine than Eric does. I'm within a couple hundred yards of that mine. That mine that was former Little Dog Coal Company site was reclaimed several years ago, and my dad worked there, as did my grandfathers. Today, it's the site of the Miners Soccer Association and one of their facilities where kids play soccer pretty much all year long. About a mile or so down the road on Route 16 heading to the east is Aladdin Steel Company, which is the largest contiguous industrial building in all of Macoupin County, a little over 200,000 square feet of steel warehouse space. It sits on top of what used to be the Gillespie Coal Company site that closed in 1910 and was reclaimed in the late 1970s. About 3 more miles further east is a carpet retailer that sits on top of what used to be the Horsby Coal Company site that closed also in the early 1900s, and now, after reclamation work, is a very successful carpet and flooring retail site and wholesale distributor that sells product all the way from St. Louis, Missouri to Springfield, Illinois. A little farther to the south from them is Ideal Fabricating, which is a small-sized company in White City, Illinois, a village of 300 people. 300 people in the entire village. And Ideal Fabricating has about 15 employees, and they make commercial dumpsters. In fact, they even use a couple of the old mine buildings that were left from the original site for part of their fabricating facility. Now, 15 jobs may not seem like a lot, but if you live in a town of 300 people, I can assure you 15 jobs in an industry where you can drive to work or walk to it from your house is a pretty nice thing. On down from there is a winery which has also been located on a former mine site. It was once the Livingston Coal Company. All these businesses that I'm citing, and I could probably take up several more minutes of testimony on that, are all on reclaimed coal mine sites. And what's particularly significant about it is those mines were reclaimed, those businesses located on those sites with no incentives to those businesses. There were no inducements from the state of Illinois or from local governments to offer them special favors to redevelop that land. They did it because they were in a favorable location vis-a-vis other infrastructure, and because they were able to buy land at a reasonable price. And today there are jobs in those communities, jobs that have not entirely replaced the coal mine jobs that were lost when the mines closed, but have certainly blunted the effects of that in those communities today. I used to play on top of the coal mine that was just down the road from me when I was a kid. We used to act like we were walking on the moon because you walk on those slag piles. It was unworldly, I will tell you that. Today, kids still play on that mine, but they're playing soccer. And it seems to us in central Illinois that with the remaining amount of work that needs to be done for cleaning up abandoned mines in our area and in other areas of the country, $10 billion worth of need that remains, we should not only reauthorize the AML bill entirely, but the Reclaim Act shifts those funds forward so that we can more aggressively attack the problem. And we all know from simple economics that if we clean the mines up now, not only have we blunted the effect of the pollution that we cause, we're going to do it at a less expensive rate than if we put it off for the future, because things always cost more money tomorrow than they do today. And it's just bad policy to keep pushing that can down the road. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today and urge you to pass Reclaim, not just through this committee, but through the House, and work to get it through the Congress and be signed, because the jobs that it believes can be created, I can tell you will be created because I've seen them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Now, the chair recognizes Mr. Wood for 5 minutes.
Chairman Lowenthal, Ranking Member Gosar, and other members of the committee, subcommittee rather. My name is Chris Wood, and I'm the president and CEO of Trout Unlimited. Because our 300,000 members and supporters are passionate anglers who care deeply about clean water, I wanted to gratuitously show you this picture of a large striped bass that I pulled out of the Potomac 2 days ago. Yeah, I was actually fishing this morning before this hearing. There's a reason beyond bragging why I showed you that picture. This map shows where that striped bass's older sister, Betty, traveled before she was caught in 2018 and not released. The point that I'm trying to make is that we all live downstream. In Pennsylvania alone, as has been said, over 2.5 million people live within a mile of an abandoned coal mine. All of us are affected in one way or another by abandoned mine waste. Betty the bass met her demise in the Chesapeake Bay, and too many streams that feed into the bay look like this. In Pennsylvania alone, more than 5,600 miles of waterways are polluted by abandoned mine drainage. Abandoned mines sit on the landscape like ticking time bombs, waiting to release their toxic brew into our rivers and streams in our communities. The good news is that we know how to fix them. We know how to clean them up. Often it involves simply rerouting the stream or the drainage from an old mine through a series of settling ponds and wetlands that have limestone and compost, and allowing the metals to leach out or to settle out. The now clean water can then re-enter the stream. As has been said already, construction of these passive treatment systems and active treatment systems creates high-paying, family wage jobs in rural parts of Appalachia. There are two limiting factors to cleaning up abandoned mines. The first is money, and thankfully the Abandoned Mine Land Fund, created under the Surface Mine Coal Reclamation Act has plowed approximately $11 billion into fixing the health and safety issues on some mines and cleaning up others. And I would be remiss, as has been pointed out before me, not to point out that the AML fund expires in a few years, and we believe it is absolutely vital that Congress reauthorize this most important piece of legislation. Liability is a little bit more complicated. So consider that TU might spend $250,000 to improve water quality by 80% or even 90% in a stream, and make the fishery healthy again. But to get to that additional increment of 10%, it might be $3 million to meet Clean Water Act standards. The existing law leaves us open to the government or others through a citizen lawsuit coming after us to get to 100%. Making it easier for groups such as TU that have no legal or historic interest in abandoned mines to make our waters more swimmable and fishable should be a high priority. This is Owen Kester on a place called Potts Run near his home in Pennsylvania. His mom, Rachel, works for us at TU, and she's actually leading the cleanup of Potts Run. Owen, as you can see here, I'm not sure that fish is going to make it, but Owen was pretty pleased with his recent catch of a bluegill. And thanks to the efforts of his mom and our other partners in the state, instead of bluegill, in a few years, Owen will be able to catch native brook trout in his home water. In the last Congress, the House passed the Community Reclaimer Act without opposition. That is because there is simply no constituency for acid mine drainage. There is no yellow or orange stream lobby. Improving water quality around the nation is a fundamental goal of this subcommittee, and we could not be more pleased that the subcommittee is looking at one of the most vexing remaining water quality problems in coal country. So for that reason, we urge you to pass H.R. 315, the Community Reclaimer Act, and to reauthorize the AML fund. We stand ready to work with you so that kids like Owen can have clean water and fishable waters in their home neighborhoods. Thank you for considering our views, and thank you for working with us on these important matters.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. I want to thank the panel for their testimony and how well you did to stay within the 5 minutes and clearly describe the issues that are before us. I remind the members that of the committee, Rule 3D imposes a 5-minute limit on questions. The chair is now going to recognize members for questions that they may ask the witnesses. I will recognize myself now for 5 minutes. I want to start with Mr. Dixon. You know, there's some concern, particularly from the industry, that the Reclaim Act would divert money away from abandoned mine restoration and towards unrelated activities. How do you address that concern?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Lowenthal. I want to start by reading a couple sections from the actual language. First, quote, use of funds. Funds distributed to a state or Indian tribe under subsection D shall be used only for projects classified under the priorities of section 403A, end quote. And another quote from the bill, quote, prohibition on certain use of funds. Any state or Indian tribe that uses the funds distributed under this section for purposes other than reclamation or drainage abatement expenditures as made eligible by section 404 and for the purposes authorized under subsections F and G shall be barred from receiving any subsequent funding under this section. So these projects funded under the Reclaim Act, they're mine reclamation projects like other mine reclamation projects funded under SMACRA. They just add a component of adding development use, including like a development use in mind to the project design. There's still reclamation projects that are doing construction and the planning and design work needed for those reclamation projects.
Thank you. Mr. Cavazza, One of the arguments that we hear about AML reauthorization has been that the program itself has been mismanaged, and that the reason there are so many AML sites remaining is that only a small fraction of the AML fee has gone to actual reclamation. Is there any truth to that argument, or can you explain that to us?
Sure. Thank you for the question. First, I want to say that the AML programs across the country are proud of their good stewardship of the AML funding and the enormous social and economic benefits that have been leveraged through the efficient and effective use of the AML funding. I'm going to read some hard numbers from you that OSM developed that account for all the AML grants that have been awarded to states between FY 1977 and FY 2016. First, that information provided by OSM shows that the administrative costs for the program over those nearly 40 years are about 8% of the money that's been spent. Approximately $5.5 billion, this is as of FY 2016, was distributed, and from that about $3.5 billion actually went to on-the-ground construction of AML projects. About $1 billion of that $5.5 billion was used to plan, design, and permit, and also manage the construction of those projects, which is certainly a necessary evil that has to be paid for to get these projects on the ground. About $300 million went into AMD set-aside accounts, and we certainly heard a lot about AMD problems here from the panel, and there's a lot of interest and support for cleaning up abandoned mine drainage across the country. About $260 million is earmarked for construction of projects that had not yet been undertaken, and about $440 million was spent on the administrative costs. So I think that the information provided by OSM shows that the money has been very efficiently and effectively used, and most of the money granted has gone toward reclamation of abandoned mines as was intended by Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, I'd like you to speak to us about the potential economic development benefits of using AML pilot money, program money, for targeted projects, such as the Swoyersville refuse pile. Could you speak to you about your experience with this project? And how does reclaiming an abandoned mine also help a community economically? And we only have a short time.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. The Swoyersville project in particular has multiple partners, and they come from the private sector on through the state and federal agencies that are our partners in the pilot program. We have a Keystone Reclamation Fuels Management Company that's managing the actual hauling and waste coal material out from the site. EPCAMR is doing some of the grant administration and the management of the project. The Pottsville District Mining Office and the Office of Surface Mining are dealing with the government finance construction contract side of things and the surface mine permits that are parts of the phase of the project. Northampton Generating and the cogeneration plants at Panther Creek are the two cogen plants that are removing the waste coal piles to generate electricity that otherwise the plants might have to shut down partially and jobs could be lost or reduced hours are in place in those facilities. We also have a partnership with the coal industry who owns the property that is working to donate portions of it back to the community that is in desperate need of additional recreational and community benefits to have an area for their youth to be able to have sports fields and usage of that for their community. Many partners are kind of a part of this effort as a public-private partnership to bring that project to the table. And the community itself will then be able to benefit from having that pile removed and reclaimed so that potential future development of the site could be utilized.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Now I turn to the ranking member, Mr. Gosar, for his question. 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I understand that treating acid drainage is one of the most challenging aspects of abandoned mine reclamation, and states face very technical challenges in completing these projects and compliance challenges under the law. Mr. Cavazza, how did Pennsylvania handle the problems of treating acid mine drainage?
Well, Pennsylvania has several hundred watershed groups and conservation groups that all have a significant interest in cleaning up abandoned mine drainage. You heard Trout Unlimited say there's over 5,600 miles of streams that are degraded in Pennsylvania from abandoned mining operations. Those groups have pursued treating that mine drainage even though there is potential liability, and also they have treated the water not completely to Clean Water Act standards, but they have done a good enough job that they have restored many hundreds of miles of streams to where they now support aquatic life. Pennsylvania also has its own Environmental Good Samaritan program, which protects volunteers from liability under state law, and that has encouraged more groups to get involved in these types of projects. And we're hopeful that, we're certainly encouraged that Congress is looking at a federal program that would mirror what Pennsylvania has done. And I think that a federal Good Samaritan program such as that proposed under the CRPA would be encourage more groups to get involved and allow us to get even more streams restored in Pennsylvania with the assistance of these volunteers.
Mr. Wood and Mr. Hughes, can you tell us how your organizations has approached this problem? Chris first.
So we work in close partnership with the state, a lot of the counties and local municipalities, and you know, there's a lot of consent of the governed that goes into cleaning up these abandoned mines. But the treatments themselves are relatively straightforward. Is that what you're asking, sir?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's so on this facility I showed up here earlier, Potts Run, it's simply a series of settling ponds. It's a passive treatment that has lime stone added to each pond and wetland. And as the creek moves through the ponds, it drops out its heavy metal, and then it's allowed to re-enter the creek downstream.
Mr. Hughes, would you want to comment?
Yeah, a lot of the work that our coalition does is sort of some of the on-the-ground work to go out into these communities and watersheds to assess them, for one, to look at the mine discharges, because we don't have relevant data that's other than historic data on the water quality, the flow of the water, the load-in of the metals that are coming from it. And so what we'll do is go out and we seek additional foundation funds, state or federal support, to look at what are the volumes of water coming out of these mine discharges over a period of time, so we get a good hydrologic year to find out how big of a system are we going to need to build. You know, is it a wet year or a dry year that we're looking at to kind of get an estimate and a handle on how big of a system may be needed. And we're talking, like I said before, billions of gallons of water. And some of the more recent work that we've been able to do in mapping these underground mines in 3 dimensions is allowing us to show some volume estimates of just how large these areas are. I think in the Wyoming Valley where we're at, it's over 240 billion gallons of water are from West Pittston down to the Makan Aqua area in the southern tip of the northern coal fields. If we're up in the Lackawanna Valley in Congressman Cartwright's district, there's over 130 billion gallons just between Old Forge and Archibald in one Scranton Metro mine pool complex that discharges out of the Old Forge borehole. So there's a lot of other work that has to get done to actually get us to the point where we're able to reuse those sites and treat that water. But, and not just with federal money alone. We're talking with private investment partners and industries that might want to come in and reuse that water for alternative energy type projects like geothermal projects, like hydroelectric potential, resource recovery of the metals, sale of the water to different industries once the water's been treated. And even in the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, there's an incentive to treat that water, and they can get paid for it for consumptive use or low flow augmentation, are examples of ways that we're trying to look at it a little bit differently.
Mr. Woods, I mean, so we can take a very polluted, very acid intensive water and utilize a series of biological mechanisms. You were talking like ponds and sloughs. So we can actually mitigate this a lot with aquatic aquaculture. Is that true? Can you give us a little bit more rundown of that? I know you talked a little bit about this, but we're actually establishing an aquatic environment while we're actually doing this.
Right, yeah, it's not, I mean, and I recognize I'm a political science major, but we have people in the organization who are engineers who know what they're doing here. But I know enough to know that through using constructed wetlands, ponds, limestone and compost, the metal will literally leach out of the water and drop down, and you know, depending on the volume of water that you have, by the time it re-enters the stream, it's considerably sweeter, and in many cases, it's suitable for brook trout. And as you know, if brook trout can survive in it, it's clean water.
Good. I thank the gentleman and yield back.
Thank you, and the chair recognizes Mr. Cartwright for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all so much for coming here to testify before us today, and for the wonderful work you've all been doing on the critical project of reclaiming our abandoned mine lands in this country. As Robert Hughes testified, my district is replete with these sites, abandoned mine sites, coal refuse, open pits, mile upon mile of once pristine streams polluted by acid mine drainage. Your work in this area has already resulted in so much environmental and economic benefit. Thank you, Mr. Wood, for showing off your fishing haul. I can tell you that when I first moved into Lackawanna County, you couldn't fish the Lackawanna River. But within the last several years, I've been out fishing and catching trout with my fly fishing tackle in the Lackawanna River. We can do this. And in the process, we can create jobs and economic activity, as you said. We need to look forward to reauthorizing a strong AML program. We have to use vehicles such as the Reclaim Act, which I'm sponsoring, to accelerate spending. This is money that's there, and we just need to accelerate the use of it. We shouldn't continue to sit on billions of dollars in a trust fund while the need now remains so great. We should act now to address all our top priority AML sites while spurring economic growth in a region that desperately needs jobs and new opportunities. And we need them now, not some vague time in the future. Mr. Hughes, in your testimony, you mentioned the need to link AMD remediation with economic development, the need to make that link. And can you give us some examples of how AML projects can spur economic growth?
Sure, I'd love to give you some examples, Congressman Cartwright. For example, in Old Forge, there's a necessity up there to still reclaim over 100 acres of waste coal material that's around the properties where the Old Forge borehole comes into the lower 3 miles of the Lackawanna River. And that waste coal could be generated and be used for electricity if it's hauled away and reclaimed. That still needs to be done. That's a particularly good example of a potential future pilot project or AML reclamation project. The development of different types of mine drainage treatment systems could produce different types of industries that are using iron oxides for nanoparticle size distribution of the metals for cancer research. Once the water is cleaned up, you can be creating fish hatcheries. You can be using it for greenhouses. There needs to be transportation alignment and realignment in these areas to improve infrastructure to these sites, spur an economic development because of bottlenecks to get into certain sites on these abandoned mine land sites. If you're familiar with the Coxon Rail Yard Bridge, that's a sort of tight spot to get in around this area to do some work. Another example down in, we're working with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission is consumptive use mitigation of the water from one tunnel called the Makan Aqua mine drainage tunnel. We have partners in the private sector that are taking a look at treating the water. Once we get a handle on the volume in one of the mine basins down there that we're mapping out in 3D with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission in partnership with the DCNR, Pinchot State Forest District, and ourselves to prove to them that there is the potential for reuse of this water for industrial use and consumptive use mitigation by the Susquehanna River Basin Commission.
So you already have a number of ready-to-go projects in mine reclamation at this time, right?
Sure. Yeah, we're sitting on some projects. The Swearsville project has a second phase of reclamation that's going to need 40 acres additional reclamation that has 3.5 million tons of waste coal that still have to be removed once we're done with the phase 1 project here.
Would these projects create job opportunities?
They sure would. I mean, not just the construction jobs that are going to be on the site. You got to look at the off-site jobs as well. You got to look at the equipment and materials that are going to the site, the suppliers of those materials, our groups and staff that are doing monitoring of the water, that are doing the watershed assessments. You got land surveyors, legal entities and consultants that are doing work, the recreational outfitters and the fishers that may come back, the fisher people that are going to be in these creeks if they're restored. And those are the types of jobs, in addition to local economies with restaurants and gas stations that I think are going to be
And
beneficial.
overall, Eric Dixon, sitting right next to you, just testified that the Reclaim Act will create thousands of jobs overall. Is he right?
Yeah, I think we're seeing it. We already seen it in the Wyoming Valley. Sites that we mentioned before at the Earth Conservancy are reclaiming in the Wyoming Valley, in the Hanover Township area, in your district, are bringing in facilities that are million-square-foot facilities that are major East Coast distribution centers now for Patagonia, DHL Logistics, Adidas, Chewy.com. You know, where you get your major dog food distribution on the East Coast is now coming from our backyard on a former abandoned mine site.
Thank you so much, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony, but more than that, I want to thank you for your good work. I think everyone in in an environment where that we tend to be very partisan here, you have really touched something that really has brought us together in a bipartisan way. I think you've really emphasized the importance of the AML reauthorization, the need for the Reclaim Act, and also the importance of the Community Reclamation Partnership Act. I think those are three things that we need to make sure that we move forward. Even though the AML reauthorization isn't until 2021, that discussion needs to begin today. And I thank you all for beginning that discussion today so that we can really begin to work on that reauthorization. The members of the committee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we're going to ask that we'll ask you to respond in writing under Committee Rule 3.0. Members of the committee must submit witness questions within 3 business days following this hearing, and the hearing record will be kept open for 10 additional business days for these responses. If there's no further business, since I'm the only one left, without objection, this committee stands adjourned. And again, I thank you for this riveting testimony.